No.
No, it wasn't me. I didn't turn it on. Did you do that?
No.
Okay, I'm going to pause it for you. So welcome everyone to the International Language Coaching Association Expert 2020 series, which is going to be all through the year, and each month there will be a new founding member who will be giving us a talk about a theme that they are immersed in, they are experts of. That's why it's called an expert series. And Martin, I'd hand it over to you. Can you, shall we do something with this, or will you change?
I'll change when I'm ready.
Right, okay.
Might take a couple of goes, but I'll change when I'm ready.
All right, okay. I wouldn't like to make a very long introduction, but I would like you to say a few words about yourself and the topic. So I'd just say thank you very much for being here with us. Okay, thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Those of you who know Gabriella know she's very persuasive. She asked me very kindly if I would give a talk, if I would join something called ILCA. I didn't know what it was, but I said yes. She said, you can be a founding member. I said, yes, of course. What does that mean? And it turns out that there are 10 of us, and we're going to be giving talks. And we're talking about coaching in a language learning context. And why did I join? It's because I started my career, my work as a teacher a very long time ago, back in 1977. I walked into a classroom. In 1978, I walked out. It was an interesting, very short experience, just the 1 year as a classroom teacher. And I've then been looking at ways of how can I teach people without necessarily being in a classroom. So how many of you are actually on a daily basis in a classroom? Give us a wave. Yeah, 2? All right. Three. 3 people are in a classroom on a daily basis. There are many other ways of teaching, and the interpretation of the word teaching is quite broad. I worked as a trainer, a language trainer. I worked as a maths tutor. I'm very good at mathematics, just because. And when I moved to Sweden, I used a lot more of my English. And I started my own company as a language trainer. I went on a few TEFL courses to get my bits of paper so I could do that. And then I discovered that I don't need them here in Sweden because everyone speaks pretty good English. And what they needed here in Sweden was not a language trainer, but a speaking partner, because they really wanted to get out of the fear of speaking English. You know, they had the grammar, they had the vocabulary, they just didn't necessarily dare to use it in a situation with an audience, like giving presentations or in meetings. So that's a little bit about my background. I then trained as a coach. That was back in 2004, excuse me. And I've been working as a coach, more like a life coach than a language coach, specifically. Yeah, that was a little bit about me. Is there something I should say that I've forgotten? Usually is. Gabriella?
I think it's important, not the most important thing usually, but now specifically, that you do have coaching certification.
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, just like I did my PGCE to get my teacher training certificate, I also did the TEFL for that purpose. I then trained, I did a coactive coach course. I started in 2004 and I'm certified. I have the CPPC, which is like a benchmark of a certain quality of coach. Pretty good, pretty high quality, if I say so myself. And I have the honor and privilege of working with many, many coaches right now. I have a group of 38 coaches, all certified coaches that I work with as mentor and support. So yeah, it's an interesting world, coaches. You can never get anything wrong in a coaching world. You know, the bigger the mistake, the bigger the learning.
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's a big difference between a teacher approach and a coaching approach, right?
It was a hint, yes. So I'm very curious to get some idea of who you are here, rather than me doing all the talking this evening. Could you say a little bit about yourself? So are you a teacher, trainer, coach? Where are you on the trainer leadership role? Who'd like to start?
Yeah, okay. So if you can unmute yourself. Everyone knows me, so I'm not going to say anything. So it's up to you.
Okay. Well, actually, I can unmute as well. But Analia, go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Analia from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm a recently certified coach, and I've been in business training for 26 years already. So I'm on the way to change in this shift from trainer to coach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And cool. You are also a founding member, right, for ILCA? Yes. Okay. Okay.
Well, thank you for turning up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Next? Is it Carolyn who unmuted?
Carolyn, you've unmuted. Yes.
I'm unmuted. I'm certified coach through New Ventures West, and my career has been foreign language training and cross-cultural training many years, and specifically training the trainers for cross-cultural training. And part of that goes into language training is also, you're not necessarily coaching a full event, but you're using coaching skills.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm right now doing a lot of, I have exposure to a lot of the somatic coaching world here in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. And who's next?
I'm Alessandra. I've been teaching for a long time, and now I'm mostly doing training, so business English training. And last November, I attended a foundation course with Gabriella, and because I would like to start using coaching techniques with my training, and then with time develop proper coaching. But I don't want to rush it, so I'm happy to learn the techniques and slowly move into coaching.
Okay, thank you.
Well, who's next? Anyone want to say a few words?
Okay, if you don't mind. I started off as my name's Slobodan, and I started off as a teacher, and after, I don't know, a few years, slowly stepped into this language training role. And then after a few years of that, as Alessandra just mentioned, in November did this first step into coaching. And also I'm actually hoping to do the same, do this kind of integration of coaching tools and approaches into this training and see where all that goes.
Yeah. You broke up a little bit towards the end there, but I think I got what you meant.
I'm sorry. I forgot maybe to mention, and now I'm like almost fully online. So
okay.
It's that kind of experience, yeah.
Okay. Oh, Louise.
Cool.
Okay.
So who's next?
Well,
Maria.
may I say something?
Sure.
All right. I'm from Argentina, and I started to know about coaching since I did a diplomatura with Analia. Analia Duarte was our trainer, and so I discovered a new world, literally. I have been teaching business English for a long time. I'm a translator. I never imagined that I would be teaching when I started my career. But since I did the diploma, there is a turning point in my life, and little by little, I'm trying to get exposed to every possibility related to coaching. I haven't done any coaching course yet, but I'm in the process of getting to know what's best for me and to integrate coaching in my sessions with business people and also professionals of different areas, not only business.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And Louise, we're just presenting ourselves where we are on the training coaching.
You're fine. All right. Okay.
And I think, who's next? Did I see Patricia come and go?
Patricia, yes. Patricia, yes.
Hello, how are you? I'm also from Argentina. I studied with Eugenia, with Analia Duarte here in Buenos Aires. And well, we have been teaching English for many years here, business English, but we are really serious about getting into coaching and learning more and adding coaching to our sessions with our clients.
My heart is beating so hard now, my chest is going to break. So many great coaches out there, and your different positions in, you know, where you are and everything. Love it. So thank you. And Louise, would you like to say something?
Okay.
Ah, you're muted.
Yep.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yep, fine.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. And hi, Gabriela. I'm based in Milano, in Italy, and I've been working as a business English trainer coach for a few years. And now actually I'm following a coaching training. And not because I want to become a coach, but because I want to integrate coaching in my training. And I at the beginning, I followed very specific classes like the one of Gabriela, but then I understood that I have to, you know, do it properly. So, I mean, so just, it's not, I mean, you need really to know how to use it, what it is and how to do it, okay? So that's, thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, as you saw, I was getting very excited to hear that where you are on your journey and how you want to integrate, because coaching isn't one thing. It's what you do with it. It's like money. If you don't use it, coaching, then it doesn't have so much value. And you can use it for everything, for every kind of communication. You can use that coaching approach. And what I'd like to share with you this evening is a little bit of my journey, how I went from teacher to coach, and how advice and reflective learning have been part of that journey. And when I read my notes this evening, I realized I've made it look like advice is bad and reflection is good. Not so. It is simply that I talk about advice going away from advice and towards self-reflection as a journey. It doesn't make advice bad. Just as an example, we had an emergency in the house today. The heating broke down and the temperature is cold here. And I don't know how. I don't want to reflect on how to fix a boiler. I pick up the phone and I say, what do I have to do? You know, I want some advice. Who do I call? So advice is not a bad thing, but I'm talking about it as the beginning of a journey and I moved away from it. So one could get the impression that I mean it's bad. Having said that, I'm kind of allergic to advice. So I'm going to share screen and see if I can get this these notes to show up. So bear with me for about 10 seconds. That one. And that one without the notes down the side. And we'll go back. Yep, perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
So this was the... Sorry, can we ask everyone to turn off the video so that we have more white space? Okay, can you turn off the videos? Yeah, okay. And I'll turn off my video also.
Well, I won't turn off mine, huh?
No. Okay.
No.
Yeah, fine. We'll just have it up here, all right? Okay, so fantastic. For some reason that stays there. I don't know what to do with that. I can move it here, and that's all I can do. I don't know.
Yeah, you can move it to one side or different size.
Yeah.
So the welcome screen is from Ilka. This is part of the Expert 2020 series, which will end up in the members only zone, and you're getting to see and hear it this evening live. And all of these, I think there are 10 webinars during the year, are hosted by founding members. I'm one of them, proud member of Ilka, and we aim to bring coaching practice, coaching skills, coaching mindset into the world of ELT. I personally have a broader approach. I want to bring it into pretty much everything, but let's start with ELT. So, talking about giving advice, and there we go, that's even better, and self-reflection. This is who I am, Martin Richards, in case you wanted to spell my name correctly. And our focus this evening is for English language professionals. So all my examples come out of the language classroom or the language corridor sometimes. The agenda, which I'd like to use this evening, has two parts, and I'd like to enlist Gabriella's help with that. If I start spending too much time on giving advice, which is about the next 20 minutes, you will no doubt stop me. Good. Okay. And so that I can spend at least as much time on reflective practice. And part 3, which I haven't written here, but was in the invitation, there will be space for questions and answers and connection with each other so that we can talk about how we take our learning a little step further. Mm-hmm. So I can't do every situation, but I can do a few. I've chosen to focus on working with your colleagues, so you could be giving advice or reflecting with colleagues or with students. And by students, I mean the learner. I tend to think of students as being teenagers, but of course they can be adults. So what is advice? What is advice? I had to look it up. I went and Googled it, of course. And it's something, words, kind words or otherwise, offered with the intention of moving you in a good direction, future action that is heading in the right direction. Usually it's an opinion. It doesn't have to be facts. And they will tell you what you should or should not do or how you should behave in a certain situation in order to get what you want. So for example, this evening, I wanted some advice. My boiler has stopped working. The temperature in the house is getting a bit low. What do I do? And I got some numbers. So I called them. So the advice was getting the right numbers. So I haven't reflected on it yet, although I think I might have to. The bill's coming soon. What else? Advice is a form of people moving you in a general direction based on certain beliefs, values, recommendations. And you're usually trying to get you in a direction that's somehow regarded as good. Whether you think it's good or not depends on whether you, in the end, decide to take their advice. So what's wrong with advice? Do you have examples of advice? Where would you use advice with your colleagues? And you're allowed to unmute and come in with your comments. How would you give advice to a colleague? What might happen when you do? Why would you want some advice?
Okay.
Gabriella, do you want to add something there about?
Yes, I think one area where I specifically like to receive advice is concerning business issues. So that's an area where I'm not always happy with coaching. I need specific advice. I need to have, you know, a kind of to-do list of what that I take away, which is not something coming from me as a resource, but actually it's moving me forward by giving me extra information. Okay, so just very briefly, that would be something like that.
Yeah. Does anyone have a more specific example, like when you gave advice or when you receive advice?
Okay. Yeah, please unmute yourselves and just say whatever's on your mind.
Yep. Thought I saw a hand go up. Any other?
It's Alessandra here.
Hi.
I don't really have an example, but I would say, an example would be the ideal thing, like a similar situation to, let's say a colleague has a problem. So if I've been in the same situation, maybe I could say what happened to me and the consequences of my decisions and maybe what I could have done to have a different outcome. Right. So advice to me would be an experience.
Based on your experience.
Based on my experience.
Yeah, thank you. Analia, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I was going to say something along the same lines. I tend not to give advice. I'm kind of against giving advice. But what I do is explain what happened to me in my context, with my resources, and the implications that were at play. But then I think it's the other person's responsibility to find their own ways. I can only speak about my situation.
Right, right. So you're speaking from your situation, both of you, sharing your experience so that the other person can pick out whatever they want from that. Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
So that sounded like both of those were talking to colleagues, but what about speaking to students around teaching them something perhaps? How close do you get to giving advice there?
Too often.
Oh, tell me more, Mr. Slobodan.
Yes, I like it's not something that I want to do, but I believe that many teachers suffer from this condition, giving unsolicited advice.
That's, I think, what I was fishing for is, why do we have a different attitude when it's students? Or do we? Maybe nobody does.
Perhaps we have, because of this the teaching or teacher role, feel this responsibility. We're the ones who should, advise. I don't know.
Maybe as teachers, we feel that we need to lead them.
Right.
Guide them.
Guide them, yeah. Leading and guiding, and then the advice comes in there. Okay.
And it might also have to do with how you see them. If you believe that they can find their own ways, you are not going to give too much advice. If you think that you are the one who knows and who can pass this on to them, I think this is more, let's say, suitable for advice giving.
I think that often it's how they see us.
It's Carolyn, yes?
Yes, it's Carolyn here. So we can feel pressure from the students to be more the expert and what should I do and tell me what to do.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That sometimes it takes practice to not just be strong against that, but to have a very comfortable soundbite, so to speak, to push it back to them in a way that they don't think, well, this teacher doesn't know anything, does she?
Good one. Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I call throwing the ball back in their court. It's not in my area. It's not where it should be. I want to give you the responsibility for the decisions that you make. Yeah.
So I'd like to share a couple of examples where advice was given. And you tell me what you think of it. First one I'd like to share is with a primary school teacher who just run a paper, scissors, and glue lesson. If you're a primary school teacher, you know that equals mess. And the students had delivered big time on cutting each other's hair and gluing hair all over the place. And I was observing the lesson, so I could see what was going on. The teacher seemed to be losing it. And by that, I mean losing her cool. And towards the end of the lesson, she called the students together and sat them in a sort of circle. And this was just before lunchtime. And I thought they were going to get a roasting for having wasted an hour of their lesson time, having got glue everywhere, having cut each other's hair and got into fights. And she asked them one by one, what did you do today? And how do you feel about it? She asked them what they'd learned and how proud they were of the work that they'd done. Now, in the room, there was a mess. So it sounded a little sarcastic, but she delivered it in a neutral way. She went around every single one of those students, asking them what they thought they could do better after lunch. And they knew. They told her, well, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. And I'm a little bit ashamed, and I'll clear it up in a minute. And they were on board with self-correction within 5 or 10 minutes of her beginning this circle. And I asked her, why didn't you just tell them? She said, well, they already know that what needs to happen is that they have to give themselves the advice on what to do next and what to do next time. And this was with primary school. They were about 8 or 9 years old. I was very surprised. So what do you think about that situation? You'll need to unmute if you want to speak.
I think your statement, or what she said about they already know, is spot on. Otherwise, you get in that treadmill of back and forth that gets no place.
Absolutely. That's the sentence that I wrote up also. So they already know, and they have to give themselves advice on what to do next. And I think that's the extra mile that you have to go. That's when you have to hold back with it. It's about the trust. If I trust them to know what they know, then things are going to work out in a way.
Yeah.
You know, I spent five years teaching in a primary school, and you know, very often you had episodes where, you know, children were kind of misbehaving or similar situations. But in these 5 years, I've never seen a teacher approaching the situation like that. And it was always kind of telling them off or something like that. And then the students, you know, they repeated the same things all over again. And so this kind of reflection, I think, is very powerful. But in these 5 years, I've never seen any moment taken for really, you know, to have them, you know, reflect on what they've done or the consequences of their actions. Yeah, so.
She could have given them lots of advice on how to clean up, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So the second example, sorry, was there anybody else who wanted to speak? Me and my big mouth. Okay. My second example. Oh, go ahead. I'll shut up. I can't see you until you click. Go on.
Okay, just a minute thing. I like this idea about passing on responsibility to the learner, to the client. Even though we are talking about very young people here, I like this approach of showing them, this is what you created in your reality. What are you planning to do next? And bear the responsibilities.
Yes.
Just that. Sorry for interruption.
Not at all, not at all. Timing is a little difficult since I don't have your faces. So what I would like to share next is really a worst case scenario and the entry point for me to both doing this webinar and coaching. I was teaching adults at an adult education center. I was teaching English, and mostly they were there to enjoy English. They weren't there to learn grammar and vocabulary, but that kind of gets included. I have a very good relationship with my students, lots of fun, lots of fooling around. And we were doing a review of all the different past tenses. And I had to think of a situation where they'd have an excuse, a reasonable excuse for studying and writing in English about the past tense. So I chose the scenario of an alibi. You know, if you are witness to a crime, you may have to write down what you did and where you were and who you were with and that kind of thing. So I played at arresting the students and told them, oh, you must write down an alibi. I must know where you were yesterday at 6 o'clock. So having done that, my neighbor, the teacher next door, slightly younger than myself, noticed how really involved my students were with the work. And she asked, how did you do that? And like a fool, I gave her advice. And my advice was, oh, I just arrested them and told them to write an alibi for yesterday. I forgot to tell her about the fact that I had a relationship where I could do that. So all she had was that bite, that kind of sentence, arrest them, get them to write alibi for yesterday. So she walked into her classroom and she said, some books have been stolen from the school and you must write an alibi explaining where you were yesterday. And that's when I realized that giving advice is not such a good idea, and got me curious, perhaps for the first time, about what could I have done? What should I have done? And what else could I have done? I could have asked her an open-ended question or something, just to get her thinking along the lines of what might be good for her and her students in her classroom, and let her make the decision. But no. What could possibly go wrong? She lost half of the students that evening. They just got up and left, which was pretty awful, because if our classes disappear, we don't have any work, because it's an adult education centre. No students, no work.
Wow.
Does anyone have a story to top that? I'm sure there's some good ones out there. The day you gave advice and it went horribly, horribly wrong. It's hard to beat, I know.
It's such a very good story. Yes, sorry.
It was such a good story. But there you are. I opened the door. Well, I did mention at the beginning, I'm trying to give advice a bad name. Not really. But if we consider for a moment, we do give advice. So what could go right when you give advice? What's the best thing that could happen when you give advice? Sure, that's happened. So now I open the microphone. Give me some examples of when giving advice went absolutely mwah.
Hello.
Hello, Louise.
Yeah. Usually when they ask you maybe for something, you give a piece of advice, but then they actually follow your advice and they give you feedback.
So it's good when they follow your advice and then give you the feedback.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good feeling, huh?
Especially if things go well.
So it's advising someone to do something and they go ahead and do it and it worked out really nice. Yeah.
You know, usually they ask me for advice on what to do after a session on their own. That is where they mostly ask for advice, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somebody else? I do want to keep space for people to speak it up if they want. Otherwise, I'm not moving.
In this perfect situation, I don't know, they ask for advice, we give them advice, with the help of our advice, they get where they want to be. This like the definition of giving advice. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, they get to where they want to be and they followed your advice. You did it. Yeah, you pave out the road for them and away they go. So there is something about getting a reward from giving advice. So we do have reasons for giving advice. It's a nice warm feeling. Let's go back a second and ask, what makes us ask for advice? I mentioned one earlier.
Sorry, can I just say something? One thing that came to my mind as Slobodan was talking about this, they get where they want to be. And I think that's a very important idea, that you ask for advice when you have a specific idea of the goal that you want to reach. And if you get the advice and you follow it and you reach that goal, that's good. But if you get another goal, so you reach another, place with that advice, it can turn horribly wrong, or it can be even better, but it won't be the same as what you were expecting. So there's a lot of expectation going on.
Right. I often ask for advice when I'm lost. It takes a lot to get me lost. But if I'm in a strange town and I don't know where I am, and I need to get to the railway station, something like that, I might ask for direction, which is kind of like asking for advice. But I have a need, and someone maybe can show me the way to go. And if it's the quickest way or the prettiest way, I don't know. But if it gets me to where I want to go, then I'm happy. It usually comes from a need inside. I can imagine the teacher who came up to me when I was that young teacher that I was all those years ago. She wanted to have what I had, that kind of collaborative student group. So she had a very specific idea of what she wanted to have. So she asked for how to get there. And I gave her my path, how I got there. Or at least I gave her one little piece of it. But usually when there's something missing inside ourselves, we go out to find it. We need information, we will need direction, we will need advice.
Or we don't want to take responsibility.
That's the other one. That's the other one.
That's very important.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to say lazy. I could look up on a map. I could find out for myself in another way. It's just a lot quicker asking people that I think might know. I can shorten the journey a little bit. So laziness perhaps is a bit harsh word.
Lack of confidence?
Could be lack of confidence. I don't know how to find it for myself. I don't trust myself to find the right answer. Carolyn.
Going back to the classroom situation, sometimes we're asked for advice, or someone can be asked for advice as a way of flattering us.
Oh. I'd like to hear a little more about that.
Just to convey to us or make us think that we're really special and very knowledgeable and an expert, whatever, and therefore they're going to ask us for advice as a way to show that they really look up to us or to someone. I mean, asking advice in all kinds of situations can be with that motive.
Absolutely. So if you're thinking of a colleague or a student there?
Both.
Both.
Because there's usually a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Within the colleagues, there's a hierarchy.
Yes.
Yeah. And a little bit of flattery. Oh, how would you do it, Martin? I fell for that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And also it creates a very strong dependency situation, doesn't it? It kind of strengthens that situation. And this is where I have to say we should be moving on to the next section.
Right, so yes, I've got I've just got one more picture. What makes us ask for advice is something lacking within ourselves. Is either lacking knowledge or lacking confidence, lacking the will to find out for ourselves, flattery perhaps, is also going on. Okay. Giving advice. Why do we give advice? Right at the beginning, I gave advice because I love giving advice. I get a feel-good feeling of, you know, so a colleague comes up to me and asks for advice, I'll happily give advice because it feels good to give advice, especially when they follow my advice. You know, if they reach their goal as well, that's fine. Talking with students, the situation might be that they're asking me how to solve a maths problem. And I can show how clever I am because I'm really good at maths. I can show them how clever I am at solving the problem. Unfortunately, that doesn't help them next time. But at least for the moment, I feel good about giving them advice on how to do maths, or about the correct spelling of a word, or the correct choice of grammar. I get lots of grammar questions. And yeah, giving advice is feel good, amongst other things. And maybe it's a lack of skill in knowing that you can put the brakes on for a minute and just ask a different kind of question. Who knows? So, moving on to reflective practice. By reflective practice, I mean anything which requires one to slow down, to pause, look back on something that has happened or is happening, and to do that with a view to doing it better, either now or next time. And you're paying attention to the reality of what's going on, but also the theory. I should be doing this, and how's it working in reality? Thinking of students, I know that I should be doing this with my students, but actually I realize I'm not. So reflecting on how I'm actually doing things compared to how in theory, or how I say I do things, is part of that reflective practice. I've done a lot of this with teachers where I ask, how are you going to teach this lesson? And they tell me, they have a very clear idea, and then I either observe or we record it with a microphone or a camera, and then we just compare. And to spend time looking at what you actually did against the backdrop of what you said you wanted to do, and learning from that. Always for learning, never for trying to catch somebody out. So that was, back reflective practice. Next, reflective teaching, because we are in two roles sometimes. We could be teachers or learners. Reflective teaching is about thinking about your teaching. You can actually think about someone else's teaching, or have someone think about your teaching. Reflective teaching, sitting together in groups, is amazing because people don't actually do what they say they're going to do. They react in the moment, and you can learn an enormous amount from being observed, either by your students, if you have adult students, or by a colleague, or as I mentioned before, recording, and just sitting with a colleague going through what you did. I don't know how many who actually do this, spend time during the working week reflecting on how you were teaching.
I do.
Gabriella does. If you're a person who does reflective teaching, could you jump in and say how often you do that and what you get from it?
Yeah, Louise is saying all the time. Yes.
All the time. Cool. And Louise, is that a continuous process, or is it? Do you like save it for the end of the week or something like that?
Continuous.
Yeah. Okay.
After every session, actually, I ask my clients at the end what they take out of the session, because I'm always curious, because it's always different from what I feel. And then from that I reflect. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, and Ali also, I'm sure I do that all the time, even as part of my session. Oh, sure, yeah. I think it's really important to, when you're actually in it, you're also reflecting, not only afterwards, but in the moment also. I'm always taking notes, and I'm kind of got this conversation with the client, but I'm also got another conversation in my head. Maria says, I agree with Louise, continuous. Sometimes you're not working, but your mind goes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. I wanted to check in with you where you were there, because for some people this is new and they would do reflective teaching once a month. And that's just where they've started, maybe on the process. But it does become internal. It does become like little wing mirrors on your car. You know, what am I doing? How am I doing? Am I doing what I said I would do? You kind of check in with yourself continuously. I have an odd process when I hold a group. I have, not today, but normally when I hold a group, I have an empty chair next to me where I put my partner. Well, I would put Gabriella, for example. But there's nobody there. There's nobody sitting there. But on occasions, I would turn to the empty chair and I would say, how are we doing? Are we keeping time? And I would have a conversation, one-way conversation with the empty chair, just so the people in the room know that I'm just checking in with myself on where we are and what we're doing and how much do they understand and that kind of thing. To make that reflective process very obvious and very much part of what we're doing. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but it's the bonkers kind of thing that I do.
Patricia says, I think we all reflect, checking what has worked and what hasn't. That could be a reason for it.
Yeah. So what about reflective learning? Do you get your students, your adult students, to reflect on their learning? And if so, is that done at the end of, in the middle of, or how is that done? Anything to do with taking a break from learning to reflect on the learning?
Sure. Sure.
Sometimes I do through the lesson. Like I had one student, she was saying that for her it was very difficult to, like when she wants to say something in one way, she wants to say it that way. And she's not really like agile in her mind to rephrase and these kind of things. And one time she did it. She started a sentence and then she rephrased it. And so I stopped and I praised her for doing that. And she was very happy because it was kind of the first time and it was like an achievement for her. So that was really good.
Oh yeah. I think
you're making the reflective learning process obvious so that it becomes automatic. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Gabriella, do you want?
Yes, that was all that I also wanted to say. I think if you lead with modeling that, so I make a point at the end of the lesson, at least, if not during the exercises that we do, to say, okay, today I would like to say this and this happened and I noticed this and this. Is there anything that you would like to add to that? What is it that has changed for you during the lesson? And that's very, very powerful, and it's never what I expect. It can be very surprising, you know, what they notice, what they feel. So it's very good learning moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with Gabriella.
Yeah, cool. I have a short story about sort of learning moments that can occur anyway. It doesn't have to be in a lesson. I was visiting a school. The head teacher was taking me around, very proud of his school, and they were all teenagers. They were all 17, 18 years old. So they were quite old students, but not that mature, some of them. And on his way around, we encountered two students who were watching a video. Now, I don't know what was on the video, but they put it away very quickly. And I was very curious to see how the head teacher tackled this, because it's his school, he's ex-military, and I thought, okay, let's see if he tears them off a strip for watching what I presume to be naughty pictures. And he walked up to these two and he said, "What are you doing?" In a curiosity way, not a threatening way. And then he asked them what they were really doing and made them aware of they were watching a video, but they were being watched by younger students watching a video. So he made them aware by saying, what else are you doing? What impact are you having on your surroundings? So what's actually going on here? Until they went, out of embarrassment, realizing now that they've been caught. We are role models for these people. And yeah, okay, so what would you do next time? And it was amazing. He gives 3 or 4 questions in 3 or 4 minutes, how he turned their naughty activity, which I guess is fairly normal for boys looking at that, into something where they could grow up to be men. They went from boys to men in a few minutes. I really like to, acknowledge him. He's not a trained coach, but he had that leadership built into him in the way he worked. So I need to move on, I think. Reflective support is when you're helping somebody to get them where they want to go. And it sounds like advice, doesn't it? They get clearer goals of what it is they want to achieve or experience. They get deeper understanding both of who they are, what they're doing, and why they want to go where they want to go. And effective action. They take the right steps, or at least some steps in the right direction. And you could also call this coaching, but not everyone likes coaching. I just call it reflective support. And I would ask if you have an experience of that, when you have been in a conversation where you've been guided towards any of these things, of gaining deeper understanding of something, or clearer goals, or something like that. You basically, when you've been coached.
I think even a deeper, I'm just maybe contradicting this, that it has to be coaching, but when you have a conversation with someone where both of you are adding to the conversation and you're not being specifically pushed in one direction, but your contribution is valued, then that can also in a way reach this kind of, clarification, commitment, action, understanding, so all four of them. And still not necessarily be coaching, but I think the coaching approach, once again, that needs to be in that conversation. Is that a contradiction?
Not at all, not at all. The reason I kind of said it's not quite like coaching is because there is in the support something of the other person's goals. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I wrote a book. It took me 4 months. It was blood, sweat, and tears. Oh my goodness, what a drama. Because it was my first book, right? And if you've not written the book, it's hard work. So I was saying these kind of complaining words in the presence of a coach who asked me, why are you telling me this? Why are you complaining about it? I said, well, actually, I want to write a second book, but I feel that it's going to be such a commitment. Oh, he said, so what do you need to make it easier? Oh, I said, well, if I had a secretary to write down all my brilliant words, I could write a book and, I could write it in just a matter of weeks. He said, a secretary to write down your words, give me your phone. I gave him my phone. I have an iPhone. He took the Siri, if you know what that is, took the notes out. He said, speak. And as I spoke, my words were written on text. This was when it was new, that you could speak to your phone and have it right. Now that, I think, was reflective support. It wasn't coaching because he already knew where I was going to go. He already knew about Siri. But he got me to say, I want a secretary. I got a deeper understanding of what I wanted, clearer goals, bang. From that conversation, he got me to talk about the effective action, and I promised him I would write a book in 2 days, which in the end I did, using Siri. So it really, really worked. It went way beyond anything I ever expected. But it wasn't coaching because he had a voice in the conversation that was very specific. He was going to give me his solution. But it was at least based on what I wanted. So it's closer to giving advice. So how do you actually do this reflective support? How do you do that? Is there a method for you doing it? Does anyone have a model? I mean, there are plenty of models for coaching. Do you have a model or a set of steps for doing the reflective either guiding somebody else or guiding yourself? How do you do it? Did someone just comment?
Okay, can we have a look at the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Here we are with that.
Okay, there we are. Thank you.
Okay.
May I say something here?
Absolutely.
I don't have a method, but I'm trying to develop one. And because I typically engage in reflection, and what I'm trying to do now is to give tools to my clients so that they process their own information. And what I am doing is a kind of game-like thing where I put question pronouns, questions, I put adverbs on the table, and I ask them to create questions out of the blue and then apply that to their process. Wow. So what I find is that, to my surprise, very usually they ask questions that I couldn't have asked if I have made them myself. Yeah. And they are surprised because they typically say, wow, look at what type of things I put together to reflect on my process. Because it looks like a game at the beginning, but then they have to pass this on to their own process. Right. So I always ask them, okay, let's become curious about yourself. Since they typically say, well, I don't know, I started creating something more tangible that they can lay their hands on. And I am seeing, so far, I have been seeing very good results.
Cool. I like that better than the one I've got.
It's very good, yeah.
Okay. Well, I wanted to give you a tool to take away. It's very, very simple. At the same time, it leads us into coaching. For those of you who are not certified coaches, we ask a hell of a lot of questions in coaching. And these steps that I'm coming up with now are going to give you the kind of questions you can use in coaching. You don't need to write it down. Gabriella will send you the pictures afterwards. I just volunteered her for that. So it's not my work exactly. This was a person by the name of Gibbs. I need to hide your pictures. Graham Gibbs, there we go. Back in 1988, when my daughter was born, when I was sitting at home as a new stay-at-home daddy, I had plenty of time to read. And the book was called Learning by Doing, and I'm really into like kinesthetic learning, and I thought it would be about that. And in there was a six-step method for reflecting. The first step is obvious. It's what happened. Description. Get a very clear description. Remember the primary school teacher sitting the students down and just saying, what happened? Getting some idea of the reality of the situation. Who was there? What were they doing? What were they up to? And in particular, the results. Like, why are we even pausing on this? Because often we'll choose to reflect on things when they went a bit wrong, because there's most learning in that. There's learning in things going right, but there's more learning when things go a bit wrong. So description. Where do we go from there? We go to, how do you feel about it? Because our feelings led us into perhaps the naughty behavior or whatever it was that got us into this event or this situation. And scanning around how you feel about it, how you were feeling about it, how you are feeling about it now, examining the feelings that are associated with that situation. This is also, I believe, used for investigating situations of bullying or, that kind of events. So it's not always the bad stuff, by the way, although I'm focusing on this as an evaluation of something that might have gone wrong. You can look at what went well or badly and the reasons for it. We're trying to work out now the mechanics of what happened, the why, what made it so. How do we get all this glue on the floor? And without blame, very important in this, to look at it objectively. Now we can dig into the analysis. Now we know, here's the lesson, here's the learning. Remember the boys in the corridor with the pornography on their DVD? Yeah, okay, we're learning, we're growing up. It might not last very long, but we went from boys to men just for a second, and there's learning here. In a way, 3 and 4 go together at the same time. You might find you skip in and out of those two.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Conclusion.
someone has to leave. I'm sorry. We'll send the recording in email. Sorry, just for anyone who has to leave. Okay.
Oh, we're running over time.
Mm-hmm.
That's bad. That's bad. Conclusion. What do we learn from this? Yeah. In particular, at the end of here, like when you come up with another similar situation, what can you do differently? Do you need different resources? Do you need different skills? Okay. Action plan. Sounds like coaching now. What do we do differently? Okay. Gabriella, we will send that to them.
I will. I can send this. I can send the slides if you want, or I can do screenshots of the slides later on, and so we'll see.
Whichever way you want to do it. I can give it to you as a PDF as well. Just want to blow Gothenburg trumpet a little bit, because I live in this part of the town, and they don't do coaching. No. They don't do coaching. Coaching's for football. They do mirroring. And they have a series of questions, and it's amazingly close to Gibbs' model. What do we do? How do we feel about it? What can we change? And how will we remember to do it when it happens again? That's the other thing. And the head teachers sit in a circle, and they each share a situation, and they kind of pull the learning out of it for each other, with each other, which is kind of cool. Okay. I did promise we would have some time for questions, but I talk too much as ever. But for those who are there, what else do we need to learn about? What else do we want to know about? Advice and reflective processes.
With me, it's putting things into practice, like also with the ILCA Foundation course, there were many tools and techniques, but as you said at the beginning, if you don't use them, then, as you say, you lose them. So you need to know the theory, but then put it into practice, and then develop method steps, and use the techniques. And that's my personal challenge, because when it's theory, you can study it, you can read about it, you can watch videos, take part in webinars, but then you have to put it into practice, which it's a little bit daunting for me personally, but I think once I do get started, I think I'm gonna kind of love it, because I see the potential, and I'm very, happy about all of this.
I agree with you about once you've started doing the reflective practice, you don't want to go back to giving advice. Although sometimes you need it, like how do I start the boiler? By the way, the temperature in this room has gone up 5 degrees whilst we've been speaking. So all is well, thank you. We will sleep tonight. Other questions about giving advice and or reflective practice?
Okay, that was just double done there. Yeah.
Nalia?
Yeah. Nalia flashed up for a minute.
Here.
There you go.
Hi. So I'm here.
Yes.
Am I here? Yes. I think that the power of reflective practice is very powerful. If you forgive the redundancy, I think that if teachers engage more in the practice of reflection, the gains would be so many for the learner and for them that the whole task of teaching will be resignified, I believe. I think it's a kind of meta skill. I think that when we teach from this perspective, it's like training the meta skill of learning how to learn. Because
the cognition, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And where else would you practice learning how to learn if not in a school?
Absolutely. In fact, in any learning situation, reflecting on your performance, how we tolerate mistakes, what do we mean by mistakes, how do we welcome mistakes? I mean, I think it's everywhere. Even when we are preparing dinner, we can reflect on processes and then kind of gain some distance from results. The process is the valid thing in my view.
I mean, if you think of leadership, I mean, the best leaders or the best business people, whatever that might mean, are constantly reflecting on what they're doing wrong, what they can, better, obviously for different reasons. It's not about, teaching or anything like that, but it's about adjusting what you are doing based on what you have done so that what you will do will be different. So that's, I think successful people do that a lot, and they have to. Yeah.
It's how we learn to ride a bicycle. It's that small adjustments along the way.
In Argentina, I don't know if it's also there in Europe or in America, but there are some talks, like TED Talks, whose name is Fuck Up Nights, where people go on the stage to talk about very serious mistakes they have made. And it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll write that up. I haven't heard of that.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I'm sorry to run over time, which all my fault.
I think a few minutes are okay. Yeah.
We're still alive.
Yeah, well, fine. Yes. Well, I definitely like to thank you for this. I think I mean, I'm someone who's quite reflective, and I have done quite a lot of reading and doing reflective work with my clients, my learners. But I really like the way that you framed this conversation. You involved us, and there was I would say it was a very reflective process, and it got me starting to reflect on how I think about reflection. This is getting silly now, but that's what's happening. So for me, there were definitely multiple perspectives on something that I thought I knew quite a lot about, but there's always, a new angle, a new perspective. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm sure that everyone who's here also is taking away some new ideas. So I don't know, could we wrap up with what?
I'd love to have a round of what are you taking away from this. I know that's over time. Perhaps the people who feel urgent that they have to leave soon could jump in
just
first.
One sentence, yeah.
One sentence. What are you taking from this talk on advice and reflection?
I think I reinforce the idea of finding systematicity in the reflection process I give to my clients.
Okay.
I loved the 6 steps, the 2 that you gave us, because that's very practical. So if I go through, the slides and maybe also think of situations I've been in and reflect on these situations, then it's a way to start applying, this,
Okay, great. Okay, Patricia, I know you wrote that this is your first interactive webinar, and you're not as active as the others. Perhaps that's fine. If you would like to just say something of what this meant for you, this conversation, or just type it.
Well, as I was saying, this is a very interactive one, and I can say that I am a very reflective person. That's why it was like a continuous reflective support from you to me, you see?
Oh, thank you.
And so I know that I have more tools now. For example, I have a group of teachers in charge. So it's very common for me to sit down with them and reflect, not on a daily basis, but we'll reflect on different things that happened, you know, with kids or with adolescents. And so now, for example, from your example of the classroom, I am really willing to tell the teachers to reflect first and then give eventually students some advice. So I'm really happy to have attended this. I am really happy again and grateful.
And that was your first interactive webinar. I'm sorry, I do webinars this way. You can imagine how my lessons are. I have nothing to say in my lessons. I just say and see what happens.
Please reflect.
Well, I teach them how I like them to be in the first lesson. Actually, I'm writing a book about how I teach people to be reflective in their lessons and take charge of their own learning. So.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah, it's coming out soon.
Great. Okay. Well, it will be in our members' zone reading list, so that would be good.
Absolutely.
Right. Anyone else who would like to reflect?
Well, Anne-Marie, I would like to say something. I agree with Patricia. This is my first interactive webinar. I have done many webinars since I started with this 2018, let's say, when I started the diploma. And when I started talking to you, literally, when you opened the microphone for us to introduce ourselves, I felt a special type of emotion, literally, because I couldn't believe that I was interacting with you. And for example, Gabriela, I have seen you in an IATEFL webinar. It was one of the first ones I started doing. The same, now I think I can't see, or maybe I'm wrong, but Louise was here. I cannot see her right now, but you are like people that we admire, literally. And so for us, having this opportunity is something awesome, and we learn from listening to you. So if we don't, I'm talking about myself, but if I don't interact so much, it's because I'm learning and I'm reflecting. Yes, and thank you for giving us the possibility.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's very nice. Wow, very heartfelt.
Okay.
We are honored.
Okay, thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for that. Oh yes, okay, yeah. Whoever's still here, yes.
We have Patricia and Alessandra, if they'd like to say something.
Yeah, Patricia said hers a minute ago.
Yes, sorry,
Alessandra,
Patricia.
Amalia, I don't know anything. And then we'll slowly wrap it up, because we are, I know that my daughter is still waiting for me, and she should be sleeping.
So I can conspire with her to keep you up all night. My takeaway, if that's valid, is that we should tell people that it's going to be an interactive webinar. Because there is an impression in the word webinar that it's going to be one person, me, talking, and when it's me, that never happens. Although
yes,
I could, for heaven's sakes, but I don't.
Yeah, I had this thought at the beginning that it's an interactive masterclass, so it's a kind of combination of two things. So you are providing new input, so it's not just us having a conversation, but it's also interactive. So I think I'm going to add that to that starting slide and in the ads.
Absolutely. So for next time, it would be more of us explaining how we want this to run. Yeah.
Learning by doing, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. If there are any comments, then please now, and then we'd wrap up. Okay, if that's all right with everyone. And definitely, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, either very early or very late, or I mean, it depends where you are, but I think this was a good time. And we'll probably have these at this time. So we'll be posting about this and sending out, you know, newsletters about the next one. So every month there will be a new interactive masterclass, okay, the Expert 2020 series. So we'll be looking forward to that. And well, I mean, we're actually going to have a video library, right? So we're going to have these recordings and they'll be all there, you know, so it will be a really remarkable series. So, so thank you very much for everyone for being here. And I think it's safe enough to say goodbye now, slowly. So thank you.
Yes, we're saying goodbye and good night. Thank you for coming. Yeah. See you again.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Perhaps we could stay on for a few minutes, Gabriella, and capture the learning.
Okay, okay. Okay.
So.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now, okay?